So thank you to our wonderful panel who are joining us today, who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. I'll just start us off by acknowledging that wherever we are today, we are meeting on Aboriginal land. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past and present, and thank them for their custodianship and their care for the land that we meet on. I'm very excited. I read a paper recently about restoring songlines and how the songlines are being restored up Australia's east coast. And that's an amazing opportunity for people to connect to their culture and for cultures to connect to one another. And I think that feeds a little bit into what we're trying to do today, which is trying to wrap different elements of teaching and classroom environments together and reflect on what that means for us. So I'd like to extend my acknowledgement and respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today listening to this video. So I'm going to pass over to the panel members and ask them to introduce themselves. And you guys get 2 minutes each, and I will be very hard on the time. So let's start with Megan Gilmour.
Thanks, Megan. It's wonderful to be here today. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this. So I'm best known as a social innovator, I guess, and however, the longest part of my working life has been spent in complex social and economic development across developing countries. I'm a Churchill Fellow who studied school support for students with serious illness in 2017, and I visited Finland and Sweden, the Netherlands and Belgium, the United Kingdom and Canada, and I released a policy paper through the Churchill Foundation on this subject earlier this year. I'm co-founder and CEO of Missing School and Robots for Good, and creator of National Telepresence Robot Service that's keeping students with serious illness connected to their classrooms. And that works across education and health systems in Australia. But my work is really passionately driven by my own experience as a mum to a young son who survived a 2-year battle for life. And I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to share my perspectives with the audience.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, Cody.
Short and sweet. Okay, my name is Cody, Cody Smith. I'm an intersex advocate, have been for about 8 years now. I currently work as a Senior Projects Officer at Intersex Human Rights Australia. I was previously the Intersex Project worker at Agenda, which I understand that this group has met Gabe, who currently works for Agenda. I have a background in science communication and library and information services, and I have lived experience of intersex variation and medical violence. So I guess that's where my advocacy comes from.
Thank you very much, Cody. Jackie.
Thanks, Megan. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I think it's really great to be on this panel with some very accomplished people, so thank you for that. I also think it's a privilege always to be able to speak with early career teachers, because that's a really important part of the work that we as educators and principals do, be able to speak with people coming through. So I'm an educator of about 23 years now, scarily, educational leader for the past 15 years in various forms. I was the principal of Flexible Education, which was a suite of specialist schools for students with complex and challenging needs, including the hospital school at Canberra Hospital, Murrumbidgee School at the Bimberi Juvenile Justice Centre, Mullion, a new program built and run out of the Smith family in Whelband, Distance Education, a partnership with Finnegan's, Finnegan Education in New South Wales, the youth workers for the ACT public education system, and the Cottage, which was a partnership between CAMS and the Education Directorate. Most recently, though, I am the principal, and we've just clicked over a year, can't believe it, principal of Evelyn Scott School, which is a brand new school in Denman Prospect. And it is a P to 10. It will be a P to 10. We have our high school opening in 2023, but at the moment we're quite a small little primary school of about, preschool to primary school of about 200 kids now. And yeah, it's just great to be building a new culture. So that's why all of the things that we'll be discussing today will be really interesting, because building a culture rather than changing a culture has obvious challenges, but also you have the privilege of being able to start as though you mean to go on. So we want to have a very inclusive culture right from the start. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie. And Cathryn.
All right. First off, thanks for having me on this panel. It is very intimidating, only being in my second year and being on a panel, but that's okay. So I'm a second year teacher. I have an early childhood specialty, so I teach predominantly under about year 2. So last year I was on a K1 class, and then this year I'm teaching full-time 2 preschool classes. Prior to that, I worked in early childhood education, and I worked in all kinds of roles, in childcare centres, from room leaders all the way up to managing 2 different childcare centres that had 180 children in each. That was during my uni time as well, where I also studied part-time while I had children at home and a life outside of uni. I also grew up as the only sibling to a child with chronic and terminal illness, so I have some lived experience of inclusion from that perspective, as well as the importance of the sibling perspective, who often usually does get lost in the system because we're so focused on that particular child and that particular child's parents, but we don't remember how much that affects their siblings and the survivor guilt and the complexities that can impact their life long term from there. So this year, like I said, I'm teaching preschool at Theodore Primary, which is a very small school in South Canberra, and I love teaching the little ones. They are by far my favourite, even if it's online, which is pretty complicated to do when they can't read, but that's okay. Yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as everybody can see, we've got a huge range of lived experiences and perspectives in this panel, which I'm absolutely chuffed about. And I'm going to start us off with a question. So the questions came from the pre-service teachers themselves. And our first question is, what does an inclusive classroom look and sound like? So we might go the other direction this time. So Cathryn, do you want to start us off?
I love this question, because a lot of what inclusion looks like in early childhood is completely different to what inclusion looks like in upper levels of primary school and high school. Because in an early childhood classroom, it is universal strategies, because you're not just including those children who are neurodiverse or have complicated needs. It's these children, most of them can't read. A lot of them can't pronounce words properly anyway. A lot of them come from really complex family backgrounds. So you do use those universal strategies for all of the children. So for me, being in preschool, what that looks like is a huge use of visuals. It looks like a collaborative space where we investigate the children's questions more than the curriculum, because that drives where we go. It looks like a space where there is classroom agreements, there is understandings about how we act in a certain space and what we can do to support each other. But it's done with the children's interests and their ideas at the forefront. So if they're using language like we use our walking feet, that's what we'll say. It's really consistent for the whole year. It's not we don't run inside. It's really positive. It's been there's we use our walking feet. We use our gentle hands. The joy that I have with early childhood is that you can really impact those children to understand that not everyone's brains work the same. And that's completely okay. So, for example, in one of my classes at the moment, I have a gorgeous little boy who is nonverbal. We're definitely thinking autistic. We're in the process of the diagnosis at the moment. But anytime he has had a meltdown or had a moment where he needs extra time or he's throwing things and screaming, there's been no hesitation from the other children because, oh, his brain just works differently. Some people speak different languages. His brain speaks a different language, and that's okay. And it's our job to help him understand his words. And so we can understand each other's words. And you don't, at least in my experience, you don't get that level of openness and understanding in upper levels as easily, where it's just, this is how it is, and every child's completely different. So for me, the inclusive classroom in early childhood is those universal strategies. So you have the visuals, you have the reminders, you have consistency, you have a routine, but it's all driven by the children themselves. It's not driven by the teacher. We're just here to remind it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate. Okay, so I might go to Jackie then, because Jackie's going to build from the early childhood up a bit for us.
Thank you. I'm just working out ways how I can get Kate to come over and work for us. So later. I'm always self-serving in this situation. So yeah, like Kate, I love that question too. I think for me, and anyone who knows me or the work that I've done, or even just hearing the background, it's been all inclusive. That's the whole point, I think. What we wanted to do with building this brand new school was to make sure, and luckily the Canberra Times didn't misquote me when I was saying that everybody belongs at this school. So that's the first thing that we make sure that all children know. The other thing too is we have inclusive global concepts that every child does across the school. And funnily enough, the first one that we did in term 1, we began with belonging. So what does that look like for preschool right through to year 5? We don't have a year 6 at the moment yet. So yeah, it's actually as simple and as complicated as that. My job as the principal is to remove barriers. That's my job. And when I see barriers, my job is to step in. So whether it's connecting students, as we have this year with the hospital school, and making sure they have a robot, just before lockdown happened, Megan. But that's part of the job, to make sure that those children get what they need. So we spend a lot of time building a pedagogical framework right from the start, and I know that that's possibly not something that all schools do. That's fine. We thought that we wanted to really be explicit about everything that we did, because we know that particularly in education, there's a thing called default culture. It's actually very well researched, and I'm looking at my board at the moment because I have it up on my board every day. Richard Gilmour particularly talks about his work over 30 years has led him to an increasing appreciation of the power and resilience of the default culture in public schools. So if we don't create a culture, it will manifest itself. So we have to do that, and that's why leadership is important, and I take my job very seriously. So in terms of our pedagogical framework, we have a specific document relating to differentiation, which outlines what that looks like at Evelyn Scott School. The whole purpose of differentiation is to look at the relevant skill levels of students and ask, what are we going to do to increase depth, broaden, extend and improve upon the knowledge and the skill base of every student in the class, regardless of the starting point. So we go on to explain what differentiation is. It's interesting that you actually need to start off with a very clear definition of what differentiation is, because you can't assume that everyone understands that. It's quite basic, but it can be quite complicated too. So we talk about adjusting the content, we talk about adjusting the process, adjusting the product as well, and basically teach all of our teachers that a differentiated teaching program consists of high quality, evidence-based instruction that meets learners where they are. not where the teacher is or not teaching to the middle. My teachers know if they say teach to the middle, they get in lots of trouble. So that really is the focus for us. So I can share that document. Be very happy because it's all on our website. I have in the chat bar put our website, and we've tried really hard to put all of our important documents up as well. So I'll stop there because I want other people to have their go.
Thanks, Jackie. If you could put that link to the differentiation document in, that'd be great. Okay, Cody.
Okay, so
I suspect.
yeah, it's sort of interesting hearing a very sort of like technical level of knowledge and just trying to figure out what I can contribute to the conversation. I think for me that the thing that I'm constantly pushing about inclusion is sort of this idea that inclusion is always an open conversation. I think that people are very, very afraid and hesitant to make mistakes. And I feel that when I have opportunities to speak to an audience and engage with an audience, part of my role is giving people permission to make mistakes. So I think that one of the big things about inclusion is understanding what you're trying to achieve, where that intent comes from, and having some sort of like bravery in the space. So intersex is a very sort of maligned, misunderstood, and overlooked sort of aspect of the human condition, even though like it's effectively a function of sexual reproduction. So as long as humans have sexually reproduced, we've had intersex people. Like that's just a fact. But we still have this sort of situation where in my schooling, I didn't even hear the word intersex until like I was well into university and studying human biology. I'd only heard about intersex before that. Because I was told I was intersex at age 17. And the thing about it is that no one had ever brought up the concept, even though, I'd studied human biology in year 9, I'd studied health in year 7, we'd had health classes in year 6, sex education in year 10. There were so many opportunities to have a conversation about intersex, and the effect of that would have been profound for me because it would have given me the opportunity to understand some of the experiences I was going through there that I didn't have language for. So I think that we have had this idea of any concept that we can pigeonhole into a normal experience, we need to create space for the sort of atypical experience as well. Where we have an idea of bodies being a particular way, we have to be conscious of bodies that are different. When we think about abilities a particular way, we need to think about abilities that are different. And we don't have to have these conversations perfectly, but when you create space to have those conversations, you're creating a cultural safety that people can engage with. And that's where this sort of like, I'd like to see more sort of collaboration, I guess. So I think that's probably what I want to contribute to this conversation.
That's great.
How do we bring these sort of atypical experiences and embrace it as part of a natural diversity, and then create space for experiences that we might not have even sort of thought of yet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cody. Okay, Megan.
Thank you. Such wonderful perspectives there. Mine are going to draw a little bit from, I guess, from entrepreneurship and innovation. But first and foremost, I wanted to say that what does an inclusive classroom look and sound like? Well, it looks and sounds like everybody is seen and heard, and that everybody can see and hear. And that goes beyond physical constraints, really. It also applies to students who are not physically present. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that, and I'll come back to that, but the second thing is to design for difference. So, both Jackie and Kate have outlined a number of, really great structural and pedagogical things that schools and teachers do really well, or the frameworks that are in place. But I would say about designing for difference, and that means in innovation terms, in entrepreneurial terms, is that you design for your customer. And in this case, the student is the customer. And to some extent, the parent and carer is the customer, not the department, not your colleagues, and not the principal. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but if we think about it that way, we can make a great difference. And what this means is working with user feedback. So seeing things that aren't working as simply feedback loops rather than failure. I think sometimes when we set things up, we just want them to work, and we build and they will come and they'll work. But that isn't what happens in practice. And I think it'd be great if schools and teachers embrace, this idea of feedback loops and that sometimes things fail. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Yep.
I'll come back to the.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just finish.
I'm very aware that you finish up, and then Cody's got his hand up.
Okay. So just swinging back around to the child that is not in the classroom, and that requires a certain kind of inclusion. Maybe we'll be able to come back and talk to that later.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Cody, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, my thoughts are a little bit all over the place. I'm trying to sort of gather them. I think another aspect of it is that where you understand that there's gaps in your knowledge, trying to figure out how to nurture needs in that sort of vacuum. So the intersex community has a lot of common experiences and has a lot to benefit from peer support. And while you as say a lesbian teacher or a transgender teacher might be empathetic towards some of the challenges that an intersex person faces, being able to put an intersex person in touch with intersex community, or being able to put a student's parents in touch with a community of intersex advocates, is something that you can do to build empowerment. So I think another aspect to all of this is ensuring that you have tools to nurture the entirety of a person in a space.
Yeah,
as well.
Beautiful. Great. Thanks, Kate. Okay, we could spend the whole session talking about this question, but I'm going to move us on to the next question, and I'm going to start with Megan Gilmour. So what strategies do you use to prevent empathy fatigue and secondhand trauma?
I love having this question on the list, Megan. It's something that is often overlooked in professional service and practice. The first thing is learning about what secondhand or vicarious trauma is and understanding how to identify it. Trauma is quite an insidious thing, and sometimes we don't notice or observe or understand when it's happening to us. So I would say trauma-informed practice as a professional development activity, seek it out and find it, because I think it'll serve you in life, not just in teaching. And understanding what self-care is and how to practice that as well. Setting clear boundaries is one thing. Boundaries can be firm or soft. Work out in advance what your boundaries are so you can know how to practice them, adjust them, and to rely on them. Practicing compassion rather than empathy. I'm with you and beside you, but I'm not in it with you. From a professional point of view, one of the ways that I've managed this is to care for individuals and work for the benefit of individuals, but to continue to cultivate a much bigger personal mission, because sometimes you can't help the individual no matter how hard you try. That can be a traumatic experience. But if your mission is bigger and you've got an idea about how to change those things for many, it can be a soothing aspect to rely on. And finally, get a mentor. It may not be a senior educator, but it has to be someone who embodies the vision of yourself you wish to cultivate. And they can help with a lot of, that observational stuff that we might not be seeing ourselves, and support us to safely.
Lovely. Thank you, Megan. Cody.
Yeah, well, burnout in the activist space is one of the most difficult things to mitigate, and certainly in my experiences with AGA, we were building peer support programs, we were providing individual advocacy, and we were continuously dealing with people in traumatic circumstances, and certainly often when it came to sort of consultation, being able to engage with a traumatic history and bring that to the table is what is the most sort of like high value proposition. So while it's certainly not something I get perfectly, it's very, very important to have very clean boundaries, because I think that the overall risk of vicarious trauma is that absolute immersion, that sort of when it starts to take over your life and you can't get away from it. So it's about having those very clear boundaries, but it's not just like switching off from the circumstances, but actually creating the space to deal with it. Having professional help as if that's what you need, if it's engagement with I suppose school resources, or if you need an independent psychologist or independent counselor, or I think a mentor can be a really valuable thing in this space as well. So for me, it's all about the boundaries.
Yep. Wonderful. Okay, Jackie.
So I've sort of looked at it as in advice for teachers as well. So sort of just put that little spin on it. The first thing, and I know it's been said, but I think it's really important for teachers to know their role as a teacher, and again agree with all of that around all of what's been said around boundaries. So you need to know your boundaries. You need to always ask your supervisor for advice, and never go it alone. Really important. I think it's also important to understand that you're not a saviour, you're an advocate as a teacher, and there's a big difference between that. Those two things, because oftentimes when you start, and I know I suffered a little bit from this in my first year too, you think you can save everyone and it's your job to make sure everyone's okay. That's actually not your job, so you need to make sure, and I was lucky to be guided by some really great people, and often mentoring comes from unlikely places, so seek that out. Create a strong network and know the difference between coaching and mentoring, and listen to feedback and advice from those around you. Make sure that you do that. It's really important to know, just as I did when I first started, you don't know everything in that first year of teaching, particularly in your first 5 years, and I'm still learning stuff now. So we all need to remember that. Read and learn. It's the third one. Teachers need to be readers and lifelong learners. What have you read lately about trauma-based practice? Don't always wait for it to come from the directorate or from your principal. You need to be a reader, and that's a thing that I really advocate for. Develop that self-care strategy and consider how you unwind each day. That's the fourth thing. What do you do for your well-being? And know the difference between well-being and pleasure or happiness. Going home each night and having a wine or 12 and justifying this as being as your well-being is actually not what I mean. So you know, there's a big difference between well-being and the way that we probably have westernised that concept over the last few years. Just another little one of my bugbears. So you know, recently I had a massage, and it was a incredibly painful experience because I was carrying a lot of stuff, you know, but that was good for my well-being. And a big difference between that and going to the day spa. you know, so so just a good example of what I mean by the difference there. The other thing too around, the last thing too around being authentic. So the greatest gift that you can give your learners is to be yourself and to love your work. Look at your own opinions and thoughts and standpoints, and perhaps even unconscious bias around inclusion. You need to work that stuff out before you hit the classroom, because it will inevitably come out. So I would say that, and I say that as part of a workforce that is predominantly white, middle class, you know, highly educated, particularly in Canberra. We don't have a lot of inclusion within our own workforce. So the only thing we can do about that is to make sure that we are aware of unconscious bias, we are aware of our own standpoints. So be really clear about that. And, you know, Brené Brown talks a lot about that work, and I just love this quote: authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. It is a collection of choices that we have to make every day to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. So you can only be yourself, but there's always, you're a work in progress, right? So I just think that's really important. And lastly, the Education Directorate has very clear processes and procedures and services, resources available in terms of EAP. So make sure that you are connecting in with those psychological services regularly, and we get free access to that for a certain number of appointments a year, and that's something that should be used without prejudice.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, do you have?
I think I want to build off that "you're not a saviour" thing that Jackie mentioned, because I know that's something I really struggled with last year in particular. This year, not so much, because I'm much more aware of it. But last year was really hard, because I think as difficult as it is as a teacher, you have to remember you cannot be everything that every student needs every time. It's impossible. You can try as hard as you want, but you're not going to be able to do it, because you're human. And you still need to make sure you have the capacity to take care of yourself. It is that innate cliche of you put your oxygen mask on before you help other people's, because if you're not breathing, you can't help them. Something that really helped me was finding those mentors and finding those people to talk with. And Jackie's right, it's not always your appointed mentor person. It could be someone from uni you still know. It could be your next door neighbour, as long as you're not sharing any particulars about anything. It could be, for me, there was also all of the online options that are available now. So some of my best support networks are actually teachers who don't live in Canberra. They're all over the country. And we meet once a month to have a Zoom call and a chat about our own wellbeing. So I'm going to shamelessly plug that, and it's called Wine with Teacher. And I will put the link in the chat, because it is an amazing resource of some wonderful people who their only goal is to make sure that we still have teachers in the profession. Because if we know that teacher burnout rate is so high, we need to be addressing that, and through more than baths and walks around the block, because they are lovely, but they're not enough. And especially for those teachers who are also parents, you don't have time for a bath by yourself or a walk around the block. That's not possible. So you need to come up with things that work for you. The other thing that I thought was really important, and again is something I'm still struggling with, is you still need to be you. You do need to be authentic, like Jackie said, because it is so important that you're still you, because teaching can take over your entire identity really easily, because it's something that you love and something that you're passionate about, and you spend your time at home reading about or creating resources. You spend your entire week teaching. You spend your time thinking about your students, especially in lockdown. You constantly have those little ones on your mind that you are hoping are okay, but you can't let being a teacher define who you are. I'm not a teacher. I'm not, hi, I'm Kate, I'm a teacher. I'm Kate, I'm a person, and I teach. And I love teaching, but it is not the entirety of who I am. And that is something I'm still working on, because it is a profession, because it's based on passion, that can easily just become you.
Wonderful.
Right.
Thank you, Kate. That's a very deep point. That what we do does not define who we are. Okay, and we're running over time, so we're going to have to squish down this next section a little bit. Okay, so either that or run over time. Cody, what was your favourite question of the ones that the pre-service teachers put up, and can you give us a very sharp summary of your answer to it?
I really like the question, as a parent, what would you expect your child's teacher to be doing to create an inclusive classroom? I'm not a parent, but I think that there needs to be sort of like visibility and ongoing conversations about diversity. I think that, you know, having conversations about symbols. There's an intersex flag, being able to display the intersex flag, or the you know, rainbow flag, or the transgender flag, and being able to have conversations about what they mean. I am, of course, really only speaking to one very small intersection there. You can just as easily expand this out to encompass the entirety of people's identities. But it's also stuff like being able to have conversations about days of observation, taking those opportunities just to keep bringing concepts of identity and self and expression into the classroom, so that and just using those as opportunities to break down shame and stigma. And I think that the more of those opportunities you take on board, then the more well-rounded your students are going to be, and the more equipped they are going to be dealing with each other's differences. So I think that's what I would be looking for as a parent, but it's certainly what I look for as someone who does engage with teachers.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, Megan G. No, Cathryn. Sorry, Cathryn. What was your favourite question? And very quick response.
Mine was, have you found the content you learned at university more relevant than your lived experience of teaching, or do you feel one was more beneficial than the other? That one made me laugh. Because nothing can prepare you for teaching. You can have all the theory, but the second that all of those parents walk out and there's all these little faces staring at you, and you realise, oh crap, I'm the teacher now, nothing relates to that. There is nothing that can prepare you for that second. The theory helps. The theory is important to keep up with. You need to stay up with current best practice. You need to collaborate with your colleagues. But there is nothing like that lived experience, because then my lived experience is going to be completely different from the teacher down the hallway. And that was really important. The other thing that helped me with that was finding your marigold. And that's a really strange phrase, but a marigold plant is a plant that blooms no matter what the season, that gives out vitamins and minerals that help every other plant around it to bloom even more prolifically. There's a reason my daughter's middle name is Marigold. But there's an article about finding your marigold in the teaching profession that is so vital, because that person's not your mentor. That's your ride or die teaching buddy that's there to just help you, that you are looking forward to seeing every day, that helps lift you up and keep you there. And that was just vital for me. So while the lived experience is so vital, there is the theory as well, that you need to have the understanding, but nothing can prepare you for that moment. And it's an amazing moment.
Thank you. Megan G, what was your favourite question of the list of many?
Well, I had many favourites, but this one I've chosen. Well, can you have many favourites? I'm going to say you can. As a parent advocate, what are the most important things a teacher can do to support you, and how have they done this? So for me, it sums up as one word, one concept, and that is to partner. To partner. So what does partnership mean? Well, it embraces so many things. It means good communication, sometimes tough conversations. It means collaboration. It means planning. It means knowing, you know, where are we heading? Why do we want to get there? How will we know when we arrive? And really, I suppose, just to embrace that partnership idea. You'll know all the things that a good partnership holds. And that's what I would like. And that's what I have experienced with certain teachers over the years. I'd sum it up as this one thing, which is, you know, and we hear this phrase a lot, but nothing about me without me. So it's inclusion of the carer and the parent in the process.
Wonderful. You guys are rocketing through these, and we've actually caught up on time. Oh, amazing. Okay, Jackie.
And then you've hit me, and I'll try to keep to that time limit. Okay, so I chose, what do you personally look for in an applicant when conducting interviews? I couldn't let that one go by. At the moment, we're right in the middle of a transfer round, and we asked teachers this time round, because of COVID, to submit a video. So, and we asked them to answer the question, what exemplifies your professional practice? And interestingly, quite a few teachers put in their you know, thoughts and feelings and practice around inclusion, which was quite great. It was great to see, really great to see. So at interview, I look for passion, I look for care, I look for kindness, and I look for clever. I think that's really, really important. You have to be clever as a teacher. At Evelyn Scott School, we're focusing on teaching our learners future skills. We're not calling them 21st century skills anymore, they're future skills. Because, you know, we're already in the, you know, we don't need to keep going on with that sort of old language. 21st century is old language. So things like collaboration, problem solving, communication, creativity and research skills, I want these skills in teachers too. And the other thing, I'll just try something. I just wanted to show, can you see that photo there?
Yep.
So that's a photo of my son, and I wanted to show that because, whoops, sorry.
Yep, it's okay. You've got something coming over the top.
Yeah, there we go. I wanted to show that because if you look at that face, and I know I'm biased, but if you look at that face, that little boy would do anything that that teacher told him to do. That's his first day of preschool. Anything that if that teacher told him to go and run around 100 times outside, he would do it. And I think that's a really good, for me, a fantastic depiction of the privileged work that teachers and privileged position that teachers hold. So I you know, have been showing that for a few years now, particularly working in the early childhood space now. These children that we work with, they are someone's child, and we have to be really cognizant of that. Somebody's child. Every child has their own story, you know. So yeah, that's probably my answer. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well done, team. We caught up, and that point that every child is someone's child, Jackie. That's very deep, and that's going to resonate with a lot of the pre-service teachers, I'm sure. Okay, I'm going to move us on to our final question, and we've got a bit more time to talk about this. So, so the final question is, what is the main piece of advice that you would give to early career teachers? And I think we might start off with Cody this time.
Oh, I was hoping to have a chance to think about it a little bit more.
Okay, that's all right. Yep, we'll get back to you. Okay, because I'm confident that Cathryn and Jackie have vast quantities, and Megan probably has quite a bit as well. Okay, so let's start with Cathryn.
I have so many opinions about this question, but probably because I'm still early career, and I think even after I've hit that magical 3rd year, 4th year point where you're no longer classed as early career, I'm still going to feel like early career. And that's even with 10 years in early childhood before I started teaching in formal schooling. Now, my biggest thing is no one starts out awesome. I don't care who you are. I don't care how many articles you've written. I don't care how many workshops you've done. No one starts out awesome. We all have that moment, like I said, where the parents leave and those 28 tiny faces staring at you, just like in that photo Jackie showed, with awe and inspiration, and you go, oh crap. Like, these children are someone's whole world, and I've got 28 of them or 30 of them or however many you have, and you are not going to do a great job. And for me, that was terrifying because I'm such a perfectionist and I need things right all the time. But you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get it wrong, and that's okay. And I think for me, the biggest thing was make sure your students know it's okay that you make mistakes. Because if you want them to grow and learn and build and develop, you need to show them that you are a lifelong learner. And that's one of the joys of early childhood, because the three main principles in our early years learning framework are being, belonging, and becoming. So being who you are, belonging to your space, belonging to those children, and becoming who you're meant to be. And you're only going to do that when you make mistakes. So even with my own son at home and with my classes at school, they will tell you, they will parrot the phrase, mistakes are part of learning. They're not worried about spelling something wrong or using the wrong pencil grip or saying that the sky's orange today, because mistakes are how you learn. And if you expect that from your children and your students, you need to expect that from yourself. And you need to really sit with that and be okay with that as a concept, that you don't have all the answers and you're going to get it wrong. But the important thing is how you get back up and you keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cathryn. Jackie.
Thank you. Okay, so obviously I've got a lot of thoughts and feelings about this. So I would say that many have called teaching an art or a science, and I actually think that teaching is a craft. And I think there needs to be, I strongly believe, there needs to be a commitment to that craft. So exactly, I totally and wholeheartedly agree with what Cathryn's saying there. Lifelong learning is so important. And when I look at the teachers who struggle, it's predominantly because they don't see themselves as lifelong learners, or they don't see themselves as people who have stuff to learn, or things that they can get wrong and do better. So it is a commitment to this craft. You must go back and redefine. What I think now is probably not what I thought 10 years ago, about certain things, because just like any profession, there are clever people who give us research that we need to keep up to date with. So, that's where, again, I come back to that idea that teachers are readers. You must be reading, and you must also know how to self-assess. I know that, I probably go on the other side of things and reflect on everything, and I do have high standards of myself and of other people. But I would also say that you need to be very authentically self-reflective and understand if you've made a mistake, it's a mistake, but also think about how you can do better next time. Murray Bruce is one of our principals in public schools who's been a principal for a very long time and in our system for about 40 years. And so he officially retired last month, and he spoke in one of the articles in I think it was in Canberra Times actually, or Riot Act, or one of the articles I saw him write, and he said that you're either the right person for teaching and you find it very engaging and fulfilling, or you're not, which means you need to get out because it will kill you. Now, because I know that sounds very harsh, but if people just embrace that, we'd be a lot better as a profession, I think. So make sure that this is the right vocation for you. You have many other choices as educated people, that if this isn't the job for you, then, please, there are other things that you can do with that career. And I noticed, I had a conversation with Uni of Canberra a little while ago, and there are some innovative thinking about how to support people to use their education degrees for other vocations, and that's okay. That's really okay. because you do have to be in it, and you have to be in it with both feet. So always remember that it's a privilege to be a teacher. Children deserve passionate, skillful, relational, smart, resilient teachers who love coming to work each day. And if that's not you, that's okay, but recognise that. And also, I would say, have a sense of humour. Children are innately hilarious, especially little ones at the moment. That's what I'm just so enjoying, and such a big difference to the work that I was doing before, which was predominantly in the young adult space. They're also very funny, but you also need to, you must have a sense of humour about yourself. You must have a sense of humour every day, because it'll keep you going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. I absolutely agree. The number of times I have had to try not to laugh at my students. I need to laugh with my students. Yes, you write it down.
You write it down and laugh later.
Yes. That's
Keep
the
a
one.
book.
Yes, Megan.
Well, another great question. There's not too much that I can add to what's already been said, but the one thing that I wanted to sum it up as is courage before confidence, and this doesn't just apply to teaching; it applies to life. So we're not going to know everything before we set out to do it. We're not going to have the confidence, but to brave endeavours, take courage, and teaching, I would say, is a brave endeavour, because above all else, for me, it is the most important job in the world. What could be more important than being a steward for our future, our collective future, unlocking the potential of children and young people, setting them on a pathway of lifelong learning. So that's a big job, and I love, Jackie, I love that you raised what I was going to say, which is, if it's not for you, just own up and move to something else where your gifts can shine, because I think, what our kids really need, especially now with all that's going on in our world, is teachers who are a North Star for them, and let your gifts shine. So courage before confidence, and use your gifts. We all really need that.
Thank you very much. Cody.
All right. Having heard everyone else, I think I got my head around it now. I think that the only thing that I want to add is that no one is unlimited, and you do get to be incremental in whatever space you want to thrive in. So you push yourself to do a little bit more, push yourself to be a little bit more, and if you start to get overwhelmed, then you ease back. But I think that the thing that you always have to ask yourself is, what's something more I can do here? What's more good I can put into the world at this moment? And I think for me, when it comes to sort of like acknowledging human diversity, the main thing is that I went to a high school with 1,200 students. The rate of intersex in the population is around 1 to 2%, which meant that there was potentially another like 12 to 24 students around me who was going through a lot of the same experiences that I was, but I had no way to connect to them because none of us had a common language. So for me, like, if you're going to teach about intersex in the classroom, you don't have to get everything perfectly right, but even just mentioning that intersex people exist within the framework of human experience, like, you're putting an idea that will have a profound effect. So I think I think things get to be incremental and small, but the idea is that you need to build yourself up with that. You need to build yourself up into the position where you are doing the most good you can in the environment you have.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Cody. Yes. I think that's a great point to end on, because as teachers, what are we trying to do? The most good we can in the environment that we have. That sums it all up. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of our presenters today for giving up your time and making this recording available for the pre-service teachers. I certainly wish I'd been involved in a conversation like this, or been even able to watch a conversation like this when I was in my final year of learning to be a teacher. And I'm seeing some nodding from Jackie and Kate as well. So I think you have made valuable contributions to the learning of 100 and something pre-service teachers, and the impact that that can have incrementally on students and families is profound. So thank you very much for your time and your energy, your passion and your commitment, and I appreciate all of you very much. And I'm going to stop recording now.